Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here, and I'm going to keep trying to work my way through Sandmann v. Washington Post. So last time I got about halfway through it. The first part was really entertaining, and then it started to be a little bit more dry legalese, and my throat was killing me, so I took a break. I have read this now completely, and there is some repetitive information, but all of it is important, and all of it gives a hint at what we might expect in the future for how the Covington kids legal team are going to defend their credibility and who they might be going after in the future. Now, let me say a little something about my interest in this. I'm not a lawyer. I have zero legal experience. I can't offer any legal commentary on whether this is a good case or not. But on the day that the mainstream media started printing these false attacks, I was archiving hundreds of tweets and articles by mainstream media figures, actors, celebrities, politicians, major political figures, and speechwriters. And I just compiled all of this in this massive thread of like thousands and thousands of attacks on these kids, because I knew that people would start deleting that stuff to try to avoid any consequences. To my joy, I discovered that there's contact information for the lawyers representing these kids, and right before making this video, I sent them an email linking them to everything I collected, and I just hope that it widens the net a little further of who they can bring to justice for attacking and bullying these innocent children. So my day has been made. I feel great. I want to look at this, and we'll probably skip over some of the really repetitive information, but I want to keep looking at the rest of this document with you because it gives us a good hint of what is coming next. So I left off at Phillips' inconsistent and false claims. Phillips is known to have given at least 6 interviews to mainstream media, including the Post, CNN, the Associated Press, Detroit Free Press, MSNBC, and Democracy Now! So, editorial comment, I don't know this, I'm just guessing, but these might be important names. If the legal staff is looking at the Post first, any of these could be next. The accusations of Phillips and his companions, as published by the Post and others identified above, are remarkable in their inconsistency with each other. According to the first Post print article, Phillips stated that the students suddenly swarmed around him as he and other activists were wrapping up the march. According to the Associated Press, Phillips stated that he felt compelled to get between 2 groups with his ceremonial drum to diffuse a confrontation. According to the first Post online article, Phillips said he was trying to exit out of this situation and finish my song at the Lincoln Memorial. According to the second Post print article, Phillips said he was trying to reach the top of the memorial, where friends were standing. According to Democracy Now!, Phillips stated that I wasn't focusing on anybody except taking the youth out of there, the indigenous youth that was with me, out of that situation. And that's when Mr. Sandmann stood in front of me and blocked my path. According to the first Post print article, Phillips stated it was getting ugly and he needed to find an exit out of there, but Nicholas blocked his way and wouldn't allow me to retreat. But according to the second Post print article, Phillips queried, why should I go around him? Despite Phillips' claim that the students yelled, build that wall, go back to Africa, and go back to the reservation, no video evidence exists substantiating this accusation. Despite an attorney for the Lakota People Law Project, Chase Iron Eyes, claim, as reported in the first Post print article, that the incident ended when Phillips and other activists walked away, and Phillips claimed that he was trying to reach the top of the steps. The incident ended only when Nicholas left for his bus, and Phillips then turned away from the top of the stairs and celebrated his perceived win with his companions. Despite Phillips' claims that the students left because they were running from the police, the video evidence and statements of witnesses demonstrate that the students left to catch their bus. Although Phillips has previously claimed to have served in Vietnam, it is now evident that though Phillips was in the Marines, he was never deployed overseas. Now let me say this about the Post coverage. They cover 7 articles by the Washington Post and 3 tweets. And there is some information that gets repeated over and over because they're building their case. So I'm going to go ahead and just start reading it because I think this is the most important part, as this is where they're trying to build their case that the Washington Post has indeed been unreasonable. They haven't done their due diligence. They've been reckless in their coverage of this story. And I'll skip over chunks that are, repeating themselves over and over again. The Post rushed to lead the mainstream media to assassinate Nicholas's character and bully him, publishing their first article no later than 1:37 p.m. January 19th. The story was not hot or breaking news. To the extent the Post performed any investigation at all into what occurred, its unreasonable investigation did not take long, and contrary information did not stop it from publishing its first story in its Sunday newspaper the next day. One of the reporters on the story first retweeted the video approximately 4 hours before receiving credit for the Post's first article. In the intervening time, the Post apparently managed to track down and interview Phillips, write a story, and fan the flames of the social media mob into a mainstream media frenzy of false attacks and threats against Nicholas. In the Post's own words, albeit a far cry from the true scope of the false and defamatory accusations it made against Nicholas, the readers of the Post coverage were licensed to conclude that the students saw Phillips from afar, targeted him, and advanced. Of course, the Post readers were also licensed to falsely conclude that Nicholas physically and verbally assaulted Phillips while blocking his egress from a mob of students who were similarly engaged in racist conduct. The Post, whose coverage emphasized that Nicholas was wearing a MAGA hat, contributed to the rampant cyber assault and cyberbullying suffered by Nicholas in the aftermath of its initial reporting, which was also undertaken en masse by the mob of other bullies made up of other members of the mainstream media, individuals tweeting on Twitter, church officials, celebrities, and politicians. Even the Twitter platform itself jumped into the bully pulpit and was influenced by early media coverage of the Post, as demonstrated when its Moment feature falsely accused Nicholas and his classmates of mocking Phillips. According to reports, a Twitter spokesman stated, "Twitter curation strives to fairly and accurately contextualize the nature of large conversations on the platform. The original Covington video appeared on Friday night. However, I don't know where the quote ends. I don't know if this is the lawyer talking or Twitter talking. However, the curation team did not compile a moment until additional news media reporting emerged to provide the context of the video. This included a sourced video interview with Nathan Phillips, which was featured in The Moment." So, what's significant about this is, watch it, Jack. Twitter might be next. I hope Twitter is next, and I hope they sue them for all that Twitter is worth. Parties, jurisdiction, and venue. So I think I'm going to skip this because what this does is this whole section establishes that even though the Washington Post is in Washington and the Covington kids are in Kentucky, they're establishing that they have the jurisdiction to sue the Washington Post, essentially. Cause of action for defamation. Nicholas reasserts and incorporates, by reference, paragraphs 1 through 110 of this complaint as if fully restated herein. So they're just saying the people we represent are kind of restating our complaint. The Post published to third parties without privilege no less than 6 false and defamatory articles of and concerning Nicholas, including 2 in its print newspaper and 4 online. Wait, am I recording? I hope I'm recording. Yeah, I'm recording. I was panicking. Am I recording? I've come this far, I better check. Yes, I'm recording. Sorry guys, I'm paranoid. On January 19th, the Post published online its first false and defamatory article entitled, "It Was Getting Ugly. Native American Drummer Speaks on MAGA Hat-Wearing Teens Who Surrounded Him." The first article. A true and correct copy of the first article is attached hereto as Exhibit D. So they have an archive of the first article. That's good. The first article features Nicholas prominently by publication of the @2020 Fight and or Titano videos and emphasizing his alleged involvement as the one standing about a foot from the drummer's face wearing a relentless smirk. The first article communicated the false and defamatory gist that Nicholas instigated a confrontation with Phillips and subsequently engaged in racist conduct. The first article communicated the false and defamatory gist that Nicholas assaulted and or physically intimidated Phillips. The first article communicated the false and defamatory gist that Nicholas engaged in racist taunts. In its first article, the Post published or republished the following false and defamatory statements. The headline itself, "It was getting ugly. Native American drummer speaks on the MAGA hat-wearing teens who surrounded him." So what's important about this is they're trying to characterize that the Washington Post. I'm going to kind of like explain this from my perspective. So when I heard that this lawsuit was going forward, I wondered, well, isn't the Washington Post just going to argue, well, all we did was report what Phillips told us. We're just reporting what people are talking about. So what the lawyers are trying to do is they're trying to make a case that the Washington Post is reckless. And that's what all of this is supposed to do. And even though I'm no lawyer, this sounds like a pretty persuasive case to me. And I'll certainly be happy if they succeed. So let's keep going. In an interview Saturday, Phillips, 64, said he felt threatened by the teens and that they suddenly swarmed around him as he and other activists were wrapping up the march and preparing to leave. Phillips, who was singing the American Indian Movement Song of Unity that serves as a ceremony to send the spirits home, said he noticed tensions beginning to escalate when the teens and other apparent participants from the nearby March for Life rally began taunting the dispersing indigenous crowd. A few people in the March for Life crowd began to chant, "Build that wall, build that wall," he said. It was getting ugly, and I was thinking, I've got to find myself an exit out of this situation and finish my song at the Lincoln Memorial. Phillips recalled, I started going that way, and that guy in the hat stood in my way, and we were at an impasse. He just blocked my way and wouldn't allow me to retreat. It clearly demonstrates the validity of our concerns about the marginalization and disrespect of indigenous peoples, and it shows that traditional knowledge is being ignored by those who should listen most closely, Darren Thompson, an organizer for the Indigenous Peoples Movement, said in a statement. Chase Ironeyes, an attorney with the Lakota People Law Project, said the incident lasted about 10 minutes and ended when Phillips and other activists walked away. It was an aggressive display of physicality. They were rambunctious and trying to instigate a fight, a conflict, he said. We were wondering where their chaperones were. Phillips was really trying to defuse the situation. Phillips, an Omaha tribe elder who also fought in the Vietnam War, has encountered anti-Native American sentiments before. On January 20th, the Post updated its second article. The second article, a true and correct copy of the second article, is attached here too as Exhibit E. Now, they repeat a lot of the same information. So what's important is, with every subsequent article, the Post is reprinting the earlier version of story, which they're arguing is defamatory. And then there will be slight updates to each article, and then they attach this to the repeated information. So the additional information for the second article is the Bishop Foys and the Diocese of Covington condemning the boys. And so what they say is, in its false and defamatory second article, in addition to those identified in the first article, the Post published or republished the following statement, saying that this was a violation of the boys' Catholic faith. The third article referenced the viral 2020 fight and Titano videos, so they're arguing that they're not showing due diligence by using that as their source. I'm going to scroll down here. Let me see. I made some notes on what I thought was important. 114. Where is 114? Oh, I read that already. 149. Okay. Third article, fourth article. The reason I thought 149 was important is I thought it was an especially egregious example. And it also, there's the number of I did not know the Washington Post published 6 articles. I was like archiving their tweets and archiving some of their articles that day. I had no idea it was that many. All right, 149. I thought this was important. In its 6th article, the Post published or republished the following false and defamatory statements. The Israelites and students exchanged taunts, videos show. The Native Americans and Hebrew Israelites say some students shouted, "Build the wall." When I took that drum and hit that first beat, it was a supplication to God, said Nathan Phillips, a member of the Omaha tribe and a Marine veteran.
Look at us, God. Look at what is going on here. My America is being torn apart by racism, hatred, and bigotry. While the groups argued, some students laughed and mocked them. They were sitting there, mocking me as I was trying to teach my brothers. So yes, the attention turned to them,
Israel told the Washington Post. Oh, Israel. I think this is one of the black Hebrew Israelites that they're quoting. Okay, I gotta do a black Hebrew Israelite voice. They were sitting there mocking me as I was trying to teach my brothers. So yes, the attention turned to them, Israel told the Washington Post.
Philip said he saw his fellow Native American activists also had issues with the students throughout the day. Before they got centered on the black Israelites, they would walk through and say things to each other like, "Oh, the Indians in my state are drunks or thieves," the 64-year-old said. Philip said he heard students shouting, "Go back to Africa." "They were mocking my ancestors in a chant," he said. John Stegenya, a photojournalist who drove to Washington on Friday from South Carolina to cover the Indigenous Peoples March, recalled hearing students say, "Build the wall" in Trump 2020. He said it was about the time that Phillips intervened. Most of the students moved out of the way, the video shows, but Sandmann stayed still. Asked why he felt the need to walk into the group of students, Philip said he was trying to reach the top of the memorial, where friends were standing. But Phillips also said he saw more than a teenage boy in front of him. He saw a long history of white oppression of Native Americans. "Why should I go around him?" he asked. "I'm just thinking of 500 years of genocide in this country, what your people have done. You don't even see me as a human being."
Okay, this was the important part. So A, the Post is just repeating Philip's side of the story. They're saying he saw a long history of white oppression of Native Americans. And the gist of the article is applying this to Sandmann by name. The way Phillips describes this is shocking. I want to read this in a normal voice. "Why should I go around him?" he asked. "I'm just thinking of 500 years of genocide in this country, what your people have done." So Phillips is judging Sandmann by the color of Sandmann's skin. He is blaming Sandmann for 500 years of genocide based on Sandmann's race. Phillips then accuses Sandmann of not seeing him, Phillips, as a human being. But what this shows is that it's in Phillips' mind that Sandmann is lesser because of his race. It's in Phillips' mind that Sandmann has done something wrong because of his race. It's Phillips who is engaging in racial categorical thinking. So he's projecting his bigotry onto Sandmann. And the Post doesn't interview Sandmann. The Post doesn't get Sandmann's side of the story. It just repeats Phillips' bigotry. And elsewhere, they indicate through kind of like how they write that they're sympathetic towards Phillips and that they're critical of the boy. So I think that's going to be the key thing to pinning it on the Post.
He, Phillips, was dealing with a lot of feelings as he was being surrounded and not shown respect, the photographer said. School officials in the Catholic Diocese of Covington released a joint statement Saturday condemning and apologizing for the students' actions. "Their matter is being investigated, and we will take appropriate action up to and including expulsion," the statement said.
I hope they sue the Catholic Diocese of Covington while they're at it. How about that? On January 21st, 2019, the Post published online its 7th false and defamatory article entitled "Viral Standoff Between a Tribal Elder and a High School is More Complicated Than It First Seemed." Should have done due diligence, you morons. A true and correct copy of the 7th article is attached here to as Exhibit J. Okay, so it mentions Sandmann by name. They repeat kind of like the false and the argument from earlier. I can't remember. I think the problem is so many of these articles have so much overlap that they're repeating the same information, but the whole point is that the Washington Post is just pushing this in article after article. Golly. So the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th articles are collectively referred to herein as the articles. They also collected 3 tweets from the Washington Post. So here's where, if you have archive links of the Washington Post tweets about this, or journalists for the Washington Post or journalists for CNN, here's where this kind of stuff might come in important. They quote the tweets and then they refer to these along with the articles collectively as the false and defamatory statements, and they've contained an archive of those 3 tweets. They argue that Nicholas is a private figure, which I know I'm not a lawyer, but I do know that being a private figure versus being a public figure is really important for these cases. It's hard to prove defamation against a public figure, but Nicholas clearly was a private figure. No, he was just an innocent high school kid. No one who knew who he was. The only reason people knew his name is he was doxxed by nasty, evil people, and I hope they get those people too. So I think they've got a good case that Nicholas was a private figure and that the Post is a very public figure. And then the Post published negatively and with actual malice. So I think malice is important is because you have to demonstrate malice on the part of like a major news publication. I have zero legal experience, so take everything I say, that's my opinion, with a grain of salt. So I'm just going to read this part. The Post published its false and defamatory accusations negligently and with actual knowledge of falsity or a reckless disregard for the truth. As one of the world's leading news outlets, the Post knew but ignored the importance of verifying damaging, and in this case incendiary accusations against a minor child prior to publication. The negligence and actual malice of the Post is demonstrated by its utter and knowing disregard for the truth available in the complete video of the January 18th incident, which was available contemporaneously with the edited clip the Post chose because it appeared to support its biased narrative. Instead of investigation and publishing the true story, I think it should be instead of investigating and publishing the true story, the Post recklessly rushed to publish its false and defamatory accusations in order to advance its own political agenda against President Trump. In doing so, the Post lifted the incident from social media and placed it in the mainstream media, giving its false and defamatory accusations credibility and permanence. The Post negligently published its false and defamatory accusations by departing from the reasonable standard of care employed by journalists, including those standards articulated by the Society of Professional Journalists Code of Ethics. The Post's collective conduct demonstrates a purposeful avoidance of the truth and the publication of the false and defamatory accusations with actual knowledge of falsity, following its review of the complete video evidence and Nicholas's statement no later than January 20th. The Post negligently and recklessly published its false and defamatory accusations by failing to conduct a reasonable investigation prior to publication. The Post's failure to investigate is heightened where, as here, the January 18th incident was not breaking news and involved a minor child. The Post negligently and recklessly published its false and defamatory accusations by failing to conduct a reasonable investigation by not having a credible or reliable source for its publications. The Post negligently and recklessly published its false and defamatory accusations by relying on unreliable and biased sources with questionable credibility. Indeed, the Post negligently and recklessly relied upon only Phillips and other Native Americans with a biased predisposition. Phillips himself is wholly unreliable and lacks credibility, as shown in part by his false claim to have served in Vietnam while a member of the military, as a professional activist with a known bias against President Trump and his supporters, his documented history of making similar false accusations, his use of the January 18th incident to promote his own political and personal agenda, the contradictions in his story established in his interviews, and that the video evidence that totally refute his story. Another typo. They typed this up in a rush. Come on, gang. And that the video evidence totally refutes his story is what it should read. The Post published its false and defamatory accusations in continued reliance upon those it knew to have political and personal biases, including Chase Iron Eyes of the Lakota People Law Project, who was, in effect, managing and or representing Phillips, John Stegenia, who had also attended the Indigenous Peoples March, Deb Haaland, who is a politician with a demonstrable bias against President Trump, and the Hebrew Israelites, whose lack of credibility is widely known. So there's a chance that there are I mean, if they're suing the Washington Post, maybe there's a chance they're going to have to go after some of these individuals as well in their individual capacity. I've got no clue, but I think it's interesting that they name them by name and they're clearly researching their statements. The Post had obvious reasons to doubt the veracity of its purported first-hand sources, including because they are manifestly biased and because the short video evidence on which the Post relied did not show Nicholas or the students swarming Phillips, uttering the Chancellor slurs they were accused of making, or Nicholas or students blocking Phillips' egress. The Post further had no reason to doubt the veracity of its social media sources, including The Post further had reason to doubt the veracity of its social media sources, including Kaya Titano and @2020Fight. Kaya Titano also had a known bias, having been present to support the Indigenous Peoples March, and the @2020Fight account bore all the hallmarks of being a fraudulent account with a political agenda, as later proven true. The Post consciously elected to ignore this contrary information in favor of its preconceived false narrative against President Trump and his supporters. The only category of individuals present at the January 18th incident that the Post chose not to rely on were the Covington Catholic students. The only category of individuals present at the January 18th incident that the Post chose not to rely on were the Covington Catholic students. The Post negligently and recklessly failed to consult publicly available information demonstrating its false and defamatory accusations to be false, including, without limitation, other video evidence available online demonstrating that Phillips specifically approached the students and specifically confronted Nicholas, and that Nicholas did not engage in swarming, surrounding, mocking, taunting, blocking, or otherwise physically intimidating Phillips or anyone else present. Not only was the Post aware that the snippets of video it reviewed did not support its false and defamatory accusations, but it was also aware that the video it reviewed was woefully incomplete. But the Post nonetheless published its accusations against Nicholas without any further investigation. The Post continued to publish its false and defamatory accusations with actual knowledge of falsity, having reviewed video evidence and statements of Nicholas Sandmann contradicting its false and defamatory accusations. The Post negligently and recklessly failed to seek information from other obvious sources who would have demonstrated its false and defamatory accusations to be false, including Nicholas, his classmates, and or the chaperones present at the January 18th incident. The Post negligently and recklessly published its false and defamatory accusations despite internal inconsistencies in Phillips' claims, as well as material differences in his statements to other outlets published January 19th and 20th. The Post negligently and recklessly published its false and defamatory accusations in derogation of accepted principles of journalistic ethics, including by failing to use heightened sensitivity when dealing with juveniles. The Post negligently and recklessly published its false and defamatory accusations in derogation of accepted principles of journalistic ethics, including by failing to verify each before publication. The Post negligently and recklessly published its false and defamatory accusations in derogation of accepted principles of journalistic ethics, including by failing to take special care not to misrepresent or oversimplify its coverage, and by failing to provide any appropriate context to its false and defamatory accusations, including by failing to avoid stereotyping, including by failing to examine the way in which its own biases and agenda shaped its false reporting, including by failing to treat Nicholas as a human being deserving of respect, including by wrongfully placing, there's another typo here, including by wrongfully placing the anti-Trump, anti-Catholic, and pro-life agenda over the harm its false and defamatory accusations caused to Nicholas. They should have said anti-Trump, anti-Catholic, pro-abortion agenda over the harm its false and defamatory accusations caused to Nicholas. Proofread, gang, proofread. At the time of its initial reporting of and concerning Nicholas, the Post did not know Nicholas's age and did not make any reasonable attempt to ascertain it, despite the general knowledge that Nicholas was a high school student. Nicholas's counsel propounded a demand for retraction upon the Post on February 14th, a copy of which is attached hereto as Exhibit L. The Post's actual malice is further evidenced by its failure to retract is false and defamatory accusations. That should read it's false and defamatory accusations. The Post published its false and defamatory accusations with common law malice, including because it intended to harm Nicholas because he was a white Catholic boy wearing a MAGA hat, and consciously ignored the threats of harm that it knew would inevitably ensue in favor of its political agenda. And then they repeat the argument that it's doing this with common law malice, and then they give reasons for why they say it's common law malice, demonstrated by its failure to retract its false and defamatory accusations despite the harm and danger it knew would be inflicted upon Nicholas, including because it callously ignored the consequences of its actions upon a minor child. So then they argue for the damages. So they kind of argue that this has caused emotional damage. He's in fear for his life. They talk about the bullies, and I want to find wherefore Nicholas respectfully prays that the judgment be entered against the Post for substantial compensatory damage in an amount not less than $50 million. So they want $50 million for compensatory damages. That judgment will be entered against the Post for punitive damages in an amount not less than $200 million. So one is for compensation, one is for punitive or punishment. That Nicholas recover his reasonable attorney's fees and expenses from the Post, that all costs of this action be taxed to the Post, and that the court grant all such other and further relief that the quorum deems just and proper, including equitable relief. So they don't just want the $250 million. They want the Post to, they're going to build a case, and the Washington Post will pay for it. So they want the Washington Post to pay all legal fees. Respectfully submitted on this 19th day of February 2019. And then here are the emails for the lawyers involved and their contact information. I have emailed the lawyers here with all of the research that I did on the 19th and the 20th. I know for a fact that I got some prominent political figures, some speechwriters for the Obama administration who no one else had archived. So I never had a chance to sit down and organize that all. But now that I can actually share that with the legal team, of course I did. And I hope they use that to make as wide a net as possible. I hope this is the first of many, many, many lawsuits, and I hope that every single journalist who spread the lies and slandered these kids will hashtag learn to code. I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. This has been Sandmann v. Washington Post. Man, that Super Bowl ad that the Washington Post probably paid $8 million for. Download that Super Bowl ad while you can, because I have a feeling the Washington Post isn't going to be able to afford to have a YouTube channel much longer. Yeah. Oh, man. Please, God. Please let the Washington Post have to pay $250 million. Subscribe to PewDiePie. #1 Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. Catch you later.